Greetings everyone, you are tuned into another episode of The Agents Angle, your go-to podcast for all things to do with football agents, with me, Jonathan Booker.
And me, Peter Palalogas. On The Agents Angle this week, we'll be examining a huge breaking story involving one of Europe's biggest and most successful clubs of recent times, who find themselves under investigation for matters regarding agents.
We also talk about the broken jigsaw puzzle that no one wanted over the festive period, but it looks like those in the agents world are going to get it as an unwelcome present.
In addition to this, we have an interview with someone from the agents world directly involved with the Spanish injunction regarding the FIFA football agent regulations.
All that to come on this episode of The Agents Angle.
And just when we thought it was going to slow down a bit from the football agents world, with everyone preparing themselves for the mid-season January transfer windows opening, it all goes a bit haywire with various issues linked to the football agents world. But before we get on to that, I just want to mention a conference coming up in Italy on the 23rd of November. It is the Italian Football Agents Association conference led by Christian Bosco. And also appearing that will be the Football Forum featuring Rafael Pimenta, Daniel Bacucci and other members of that organisation.
And following on from that, I think we should get right into the stories. It's going to be a busy week. And we're going to look at a story involving, as you said, Peter, a big European club, but it involves agent matters that have a truly international dimension.
Yes, a big European club, Chelsea, who've done a lot of transfer business over the last 10, 15 years.
Now, this story involves Chelsea and primarily their former ownership and alleged irregular payments to agents. Now, we are just going to refer to a subset of various articles that have come to light over the last couple of days, around about the 15th of November. And I will rely primarily on the Guardian English newspaper as the source of this, and subsequently coverage from the ICIJ, which is the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, which includes nearly 300 journalists in over 100 countries worldwide. However, this is a very extensive subject that touches on various factors such as financial fair play, tax, accounts, and offshore funds. But this is the agent's angle, so we're going to try and focus on that element as much as possible. Now, this story could well unearth matters involving other clubs and other agents. And although this doesn't seem to be on the same scale as football leagues, on the document count alone, with football leagues having a rumoured 70 million documents, this one still has 3.6 million documents, and we don't know how detailed they are.
Yes, referring to an article in terms of Chelsea FC could face punishment over secret payments, experts warn. I had a look at these articles and they're quite interesting, Jonathan. The Guardian article in particular mentions 4 leading sports lawyers told The Guardian that some of the payments may have broken rules, including English Premier League and UEFA regulations on financial fair play, as you mentioned. They also said that they broke Premier League rules because there wasn't that submission of accurate accounts and also disclosure of payments to agents, which is the agent's angle that we're looking at. However, it mentions 4 leading sports lawyers. It doesn't mention who they are in the Guardian article.
Now, I've highlighted quite a few things from this article, Peter, and also the supporting articles. And maybe you can actually offer some clarity on some of the legal points and also an opinion on some of the other aspects. Now, the first one is about what has been submitted, when and by whom. The articles say there's already an investigation underway, and new owners have voluntarily reported some matters. Were agents part of these matters reported? We don't know. It isn't clear in the articles as of yet. The second thing is agent declarations are often required by parties different to the financial declarations from the club. So in the article, it's not sure whether this voluntary reporting involves the agent's elements or just the financial declarations. Now, in regards to the authorities, the article states that a spokesman for the FA said, "We are investigating." It doesn't specify agent matters, and we hear that line from the FA so often. We are investigating. There's no mention of FIFA, and most of the transactions that are referenced in the articles do have an international dimension, so it would be interesting to hear what they're actually doing. I can't see the Premier League coming up with specific agent regulations. They've shown no interest for years, and it is technically run by the club, so I can't see that happening. UEFA, possibly in the future, it could act. I would actually welcome them to do so. They couldn't do any worse than FIFA since 2015 or 2018 with agent regulations. But the final question I have, which regulation regarding agents will apply in these matters? Will it be FFAR, FIFA Football Agent Regulations, RWWI, Regulations on Working with Intermediaries, not just in England, but also in international dimension? And also there's a possibility this matter goes back pre-2015. So are we even looking at old FIFA agent regulations before 2015 being applied and old FA agent regulations pre-2015? Or will they technically wash their hands of it? This is reasonable to presume because UEFA itself has an effective statute of limitation in that they can only investigate matters going back 3 years.
In terms of the Guardian article, it talks about Chelsea and what happened with payments, and some of those payments may relate to agents that may be not disclosed in accounts reported to the FA. The Chelsea FC spokesperson said these allegations do predate the club's current ownership. They are based on documents which the club has not been shown and do not relate to any individual who is presently at the club. So tracing it back, it's probably, as you mentioned, the regulations for working with intermediaries or other older regulations, age regulations that payments may have been falling under. The FA, Football Association of England, does not have the statute of limitation that maybe UEFA has to look back at a matter. But this is complex. You need collaboration of any evidence. You need a proper accounting trace analysis of payments, which is not easy to do, especially if it's international, different banks, different payments. You need an enforcement body. You mentioned the Football Association of England. You had mentioned UEFA that will take the action. But also, I will say this, even if certain transactions that may have been illegitimate fall in different periods, you can still charge someone for those periods. You can have different charges, one under the, say, the regulations of working with intermediaries, one under the agent regulations or whatever older agent regulations exist. So that's not an issue. The issue is the international aspects because it is complicated. Was an audit done? We don't know. So it's always hard to trace payments back. Quite a difficult matter.
And it's made even more difficult when we do have these fractured relationships and these, I wouldn't say contradictory responsibilities, but overlapping responsibilities. Some organisations are more interested in finance, some are more interested in conflicts of interest and agent regulations. But also a big thing looking forward is the future, wherever the magical mystery tour that is FFAR takes us. Some of the transactions referenced not only involve the representation of players by agents, but also coaches and managers, which now comes under agent regulations. And probably more importantly, we and many others in the agents industry and those on the periphery and from the legal profession and even football governance have warned that elements of FFAR, such as capping of commissions, will, amongst other things, force payments to go under the table. We will see the rise of the spectre of consultancy services, as is referenced in these articles, and circumvention of agent regulations. So arguably, will we see more examples of the practices alleged in these articles under the new FFAR? Not so much financial regulations affecting clubs, but to actually be somewhat of a blueprint for people to circumvent future agent regulations.
They're interesting observations, Jonathan. I will say that the FFAR, or FIFA Football Agent Regulations, provide a new lens to these type of agent arrangements. If they're enforced correctly, it'd be harder to circumvent the agent regulations. If enforcement is stronger at a higher level between FIFA, and we know we've been covering the national football agent regulations where national federations can refer matters to FIFA, they can do compliance checks, investigations. That's something that wasn't available that much before. And also tax regulators are very interested in a lot of countries about what's happening with transactions, transfers, even agent payments. So all this will provide a different landscape of enforcement, I would say. However, there has to be a will to enforce. And this Chelsea example also will be something that FIFA may be looking at when they're arguing their case, maybe in the European Court of Justice, saying that the policy issue here that underpin their regulations, and they can give case studies, saying that the objectives is to protect any illegal transactions or payments. So there's always that element as well going forward. But we're at a very interesting juncture at the moment in terms of where all this sits and these Chelsea allegations.
And you talk of the landscape being confusing for everybody. And the fact is that only a few people have actually got a map for this landscape. And even those have got different maps as to where they want to navigate to and what they want to achieve. And just one of the things on last week's episode that threw some more confusion or a different aspect on the matter of FFAR was the award of the injunction in Spain. And despite it being a big story last week, it was very fresh and we wanted to get an informed view on the matter rather than speculate. So it's a privilege to welcome onto the show at this time Rodrigo García Lucas, who was a key member of the legal team who successfully coordinated the challenge to the FFAR in Spain. The challenge was brought at the Commercial Court in Madrid by the Spanish Association of Football Agents and by a large group of some of the most important soccer player agencies. Rodrigo is a partner at IAFA Abogados law firm in Madrid and is a specialist labour law as well as sports and entertainment lawyer. He is an expert in national and international transfer of soccer players, providing advice on the various legal matters regarding transfers, including employment contracts, intermediation, TPO, and image rights. Rodrigo, welcome to the Agents Angle and congratulations on your recent success.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you very much, Peter, for being able to have a position on this interesting topic. And thanks for the congratulations. It's been a work of many people. It's not only us, it's also about agents and also about the Spanish Agents Association.
I think there's agents all over the world who are actually congratulating you and thanking you for the work you've put in on that with your colleagues. Rodrigo, can I just start by asking, can you just provide a brief overview of the legal proceedings that led to the Spanish courts granting precautionary measures against FIFA and the Royal Spanish Football Federation over the FFAR?
Yeah, well, there are two actions in place in Spain. One is the one you mentioned before the Mercantile Court in Madrid, in which we have filed a claim considering that several of the articles in the FIFA regulations are against the Spanish and European Union competition law, especially Articles 101 and 102. And also there is a claim before the Spanish competition regulatory body, in which we have also asked for interim measures, but this is a more complicated process and it's not a judicial process. So they are now in a investigation stage and collecting and gathering information and asking, the regulatory body is asking for information from the different stakeholders, basically the Spanish FA and FIFA. So these are the two actions that we have launched in Spain.
Rodrigo, what prompted several agencies and also, as Jonathan mentioned, the Spanish Football Agents Association to seek an injunction against FIFA and the Royal Spanish Football Federation, RFEF, regarding not just fee caps, but the regulations? How did you bring, I would say, the applicants together?
Yeah, well, this has been a long process. I would say that it started in November, December last year when we knew about the content of the FIFA regulations. There was a venue in the Spanish FA in January 2023 in which FIFA representatives, Emilio Garcia Silveiro and other people came to explain the agents, the regulations. And at that time, we realized that it was necessary to challenge this because FIFA was not, let's say, in the mood of adapting or trying to make these regulations more reasonable or compliant with the competition law. So at that time, myself and another colleague from another law firm, basically we work with agents and players and are able to gather, or we have clients that are, let's say, 15, 20, one of the top agencies in Spain. So we decided to start the process. So we were able to put together 32 agencies and also the Spanish Agents Association, which was not easy because I would say that in the agents' work, coordination was not great, but I think they realized how serious this was after this January 2023 meeting. So yeah, we put together all the agencies. We obviously funded our claim. We hired two specialized law firms in competition law because this is a specific area of law. So this is not something that a sport lawyer like me should do. We knew that the mercantile process was the strongest one or the most speedy one, because at the end of the day, it's not only about winning the case, it's about getting the interim measures. We're pretty sure that we will have a positive judgment in the future from the Spanish Mercantile Court or even from the Spanish regulatory body, but this can take 2-3 years. And to be honest, we believe that many of the agencies will need to readapt or even close, because it's kind of difficult to work with FIFA regulations. It's difficult to carry on with your business activity under these regulations. And for us, it was really relevant to get this interim measure. And that is why, even if we have challenged different topics and different articles in the regulations, we wanted to focus the injunction only on the cap, because it makes the judge work easier if you only attack which is an obvious breach of Articles 101 and 102. Otherwise, for a Spanish court to take this injunction decision would be more complicated. If you start asking for 7-8 different things, it could be possible, but we wanted to make sure that the most relevant barrier was attacked.
The media has reported that the Spanish courts have granted precautionary measures, which I understand to be interim injunctions. Do these measures apply solely to the commission fee cap, or is it like Germany where they apply to all the implementation of the agents' regulations in Spain?
No, we only, in terms of the interim measures, in terms of the injunction, we only asked two things, which were granted fully. FIFA regulations not applying Articles 15.1 and 15.2 in Spain, and prohibiting Spanish FA to implement Article 15.1 and 15.2 in their national regulations, which, by the way, has not been approved and are not in place right now. As you know, the FIFA regulations establish that national associations should bring this into their national regulations by September 30. But formally or literally, what the injunction says is that FIFA cannot implement Article 15.1 and 15.2. And they don't make the distinction about if this applies to Spain as a territory or to Spanish agents. So first of all, our interpretation is that this is subject to discussion and everyone has an opinion, but it seems that a realistic approach would be that the Spanish judge is applying this in Spain. Is not trying to look for an extraterritorial approach. It's possible, depending on the jurisdiction, it would be possible to try to enforce this in a different European Union country. And also the other question is, does this mean, as the German Dortmund case, does this mean that as long as a Spanish agent is involved in a transaction, the articles or the cap should not apply? Well, this is an answer that is difficult to give, but there are grounds to say that, and there are reasons to say that a Spanish agent is free of these regulations, regardless that he's involved in an international transaction. But the decision or the injunction is not as clear as the Dortmund decision.
Yeah, that's the way I read it. I think the German link's much broader and can be applied elsewhere outside of sort of Germany. In terms of appeal, these interim measures, is that likely by the Spanish FA or FIFA at this stage, or is it too early to say?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the interim measure was decided last Monday, week before. The interim measure is in place since yesterday or the day before. So Spanish FA has already filed an appeal. It's expected that FIFA will file an appeal. But I would say that the good news is that the Superior Court, which is the Provincial Court of Madrid, it depends on the court, but it's likely that the appeal would be ruled in around 1 year and a half. So at least it give the agents some time to work on this. First of all, we expect that the provincial court will support the just decision, but also in the meanwhile, I think that in a period of 1 year, 1 year and a half, even 2 years, I expect that we will all have a clearer view on what's going to happen on a European level.
The decision's been made, or the interim decision's been made. What's the implications now in the relationship between, I would say, the Royal Spanish Football Association and football agents right now? What's the relationship at the moment?
I would say that the Spanish FA hands are tied. We had some meetings and we made some proposals to the Spanish FA in terms of giving them resources and ideas on how to make those regulations more in accordance with Spanish and European competition law. And at some point, they recognize that these rules could not be compliant with competition law, but basically their hands are tied, or that's what they say. And they cannot take decisions in most of the important taxes in a different way than what FIFA is establishing. I would say the only point in which they consider that they should be, or they could follow a different path is in all those things connected with data protection, because we have a strict law on data protection. And it is true that one of the arguments is also that FIFA regulations in connection with some data that are going to be provided and some business information that has to be provided, this rule might not be compliant with data protection regulations in Spain. But apart from that, and this is something that is happening in the history of implementation of FIFA regulations at the domestic level. In general, the national associations do not follow completely the FIFA path. It's difficult, at least in continental Europe, that they take different decisions, or at least in Spain. So the relationship is correct, but obviously they are not happy with this.
You mentioned that it was really about the time that we were made aware of what was in the final FIFA football agent regulations that the decision was taken to pursue this course of action with a challenge legally. The legal action itself, has it prompted any discussions regarding the need for reforms or adjustments with governing football agents in Spain?
Well, FIFA was very, in the hearing on the interim measures, one of the arguments they use is that we have followed, since I think it was 2018, 2019, we have followed a proceeding of consultation with the different stakeholders of FIFA. Basically, they defend that they had some consultations process with agents, which I think they took place. And I think even the interim measure decision recognized that there has been some kind of contacts. But I mean, well, you can have a negotiation process, but if you don't follow any of the recommendations provided by the agents, I mean, it worth nothing. I remember in this venue we had in the Spanish FA, FIFA representatives basically said to the agents who have 3 options, which is forget about the activity, adapting to the regulations, or challenge the regulations. So they didn't give us many options, and we realized we needed to act. In the process of filing the claim, which was filed in July, because it was not easy to obviously prepare the claim, and secondly, to involve so many agencies in claim. During the process, we had a couple of meetings with the Spanish FA representatives, basically because it's not only about competition. If you look at the regulations, my impression is that they are not completely coordinated. In some cases, they have accepted, I would say, probably FIFPro and, let's say, players' position on exclusivity, probably. But on the other hand, you see that ECA, the text, is really connected with what the clubs want. For example, when you look at the exclusivity and the possibility for the player to act on his behalf and make a transaction and prohibiting any penalty clause. Yeah, I mean, I work for the Spanish Football Trade Union, but you have to realize that the players, in a 99% cases, they don't act themselves as agents. And probably it's not good that they act themselves as agents, because unfortunately, they don't have the necessary knowledge. And this is only an advantage for the clubs. And at the end of the day, the reality, which is that there is another intermediary. Probably nobody will know that there is another intermediary in the transaction. But the reality is that in 99% of the cases, when the player acts alone, he's not acting alone. There is another agent involved in the transaction. So this is the type of things that should be adapted. I mean, there are many things in this rule that are good. Everything connected with protection in minors, everything connected with obtaining a license and professionalize the agent activity, everything connected with the player being advised properly before signing the contracts and knowing about the legal consequences of what he's signing. There are many good things, but there are 4, 5, 6 things that has to be reviewed. And I hope that FIFA will give us the opportunity to have a proper negotiation on this and take decisions and implement the rule. Because, I mean, we all have to recognize that the intermediary regulations, in my opinion, they've been disgraceful. I mean, they've been a mess. I never had so many cases, breaching contracts. There's no security for the agents in their activity. And when we advised 2015, we mentioned and we said to FIFA, this expelling the agents from the system is not going to solve things. It's going to make it more horrible for everyone. Because now every financial advisor is an agent, every lawyer is an agent, every father is an agent. People who are not familiarized with this world are entering into this world, and this is not making things better. I'm really pro-player lawyer. And I can tell you, they don't really know at this stage what they are signing. They are confused. They are also confused with the regulations, and they don't really know what's going on. And the new system is not helping.
I think you rightly point out that these regulations and what this whole topic goes far beyond FIFA and national associations and agents, because it affects players, it affects clubs, it affects leagues, it affects everybody associated. And of course, with these new regulations, coaches and managers more and more. What has been the response of the likes of players, clubs, leagues, coaches, managers to FFAR and the fee caps in Spain?
Well, I would make difference. I mean, from a player perspective, the Spanish AFE, which is the Spanish Players Trade Union, is doing a job in trying to explain the players what are their rights with these new regulations and trying to explain them. From the league perspective, my understanding is that, which is something that goes against European competition law again, or Spanish competition law. La Liga had a meeting in which they, let's say, threatened the clubs and said, you have to apply these regulations. We don't want any club trying to pay above 6%, 3% and 3% on behalf of the player. But on an individual level, I also work with a lot of clubs, and what they tell you is that we're not especially happy, because end of the day, I mean, in countries like Spain or any European Union country where there is strict tax laws, where there is a strict financial fair play rules, it's going to be difficult for the clubs to make payments, let's say, out of the system. While in other jurisdictions, this might not be so clear. So end of the day, it puts you in a worse competitive position with other leagues. Obviously, and I have received congratulations from many clubs when we have obtained the interim measures, and I think at some point they have been relieved, because I think the market regulates itself. If you're not so much interested in a player, it's possible that they will not offer you more than a 6% commission. That happens. I mean, sometimes it's only about 5, 6, 7% the commission. But in some of the cases, there are specific circumstances by which you would pay more. This depends on the case. And it's not the same to bring a player in a free transfer as a free player. I mean, why not the rules take this into account? I mean, it's not the same paying 100 million euros for a player and make a big transaction and pay a large transfer fee, and the agent not being helpful in getting a better transfer fee. It's not the same as bringing player as a free agent. You should take this into consideration. Does anybody believe that in a case of a big player, let's imagine Haaland, for example, if he ends his contract with Manchester City, does anybody believe that he's coming to Real Madrid and the agent is going to get a 3% commission on this transaction? Does this make sense? Does make sense that Mendes only gets 3% when he moved Ronaldo from Real Madrid to Juventus? I don't know. I was not involved in this transaction, but I guess the answer is, if this takes place with the new regulations, it's difficult to understand why this agent who has made such a big deal that has a lot of implications and benefits for the club, he can only get 3%. And only if the player receives the salary, and only until he maintains his playing contract, and in case of renewal, he does not get any other commissions going forward. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. I think that the correct way to approach this is, okay, we're not going to put a limit, but we're going to scrutinize every transaction in which we believe that there is a payment that is above, let's say, the general market. So why not make inquiries or an investigation in transactions? Because they basically attack this because there were some transactions in the past in which there was a transfer, an agent got 25 million euros, which he shared with the father, etc. Okay, I'm perfectly in favor of not sharing commissions with relatives, of course. This should have been in place for many years, and it's now when it has been implemented. And secondly, obviously, you have to maybe analyze this, because maybe getting a 25, 30%, 50% of the transfer fees, it doesn't make any sense. Make inquiries on this. Ask on what value added the agent to the transaction. But this is something that you have to do on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, why working for a second or third division player? In Spain, it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to get paid 3,000 euros, do you think that you would travel with the player? Do you give good service to the player? Possible.
We have the January window coming up. There's no caps applying in Spain, but agents need a license still, and there are other requirements from the FFAR. How do you think this decision will affect the next few transfer windows in Spain? Do you think it'll affect the amount charged by agents or the way the business is run, or is it going to be how it is at the moment before this decision was made, read the caps?
First of all, obviously, 2023 summer market was a busy market for agents, for players, and for lawyers too. Obviously, because everybody wanted to do a deal before the regulations were in place. I suspect this might be good news for the Spanish market, which is not great in the last years, given our strict financial fair play rules. I guess there is a competitive advantage of Spain against other markets, because at the end of the day, if you can pay, let's say, a 10% on a transaction, this might make more attractive the Spanish market in comparison with other markets. But I think it also depends on what's going to happen in UK, for example, in England. Because at the end of the day, Italy is not applying the regulations, France is not applying the regulations, both because they've got national law that is not really compatible with these new FIFA regulations. Germany, we have the Dortmund decision. Spain, we have the interim measure. So at the end of the day, let's say 4 out of 5, and hopefully 5 top leagues in Europe, these regulations will not apply. So maybe this is going to be more balanced. And maybe I'm just guessing, it might make the Saudi market less attractive. I think it's going to be attractive anyway, but maybe it's going to affect them too. And I work a lot with South American agents and players, and it's not going to be easy to implement this in South America or in the US. They don't have this European center of the world vision that we have here. One of the complaints that South American agents and players and clubs and federations have is that, all is about European law in terms of FIFA, and FIFA does only have let's say, a European mindset. It's not going to be easy to follow this. One of the questions I remember, I had not discussion, but I was in a panel with Emilio Garcia Silveiro in the Spanish Trade Union event. And one of the things I asked him is, if you remember when you implemented TPO, that you said that this was going to be followed and there would be sanctions from FIFA, etc., and nothing happened, to be honest. Nothing happened. Stupid and irrelevant fines were granted on TPO, and everybody continued doing TPO, especially in South America. So one of the questions was, Emilio, if I have to explain my clients that they have to follow these rules, I have to tell them that you will survey and there will be a surveillance for FIFA. And they said, yeah, we're gonna. And obviously, there's gonna be a lot of cases. Everything connected with minors, everything connected with trying to get a player who has a contract with another agent. We'll have to see how they implement this. I'm in favor of this. Okay. Obviously, I'm not in favor of providing information on when the agent contract ends, because the agent or the player is going to receive so many calls in the last 2 months of his contract in order to move to another agency. And some of those things doesn't make more sense. But we need to see, we'll see in the future how FIFA really approaches to this, because there's going to be tons of cases. It's not easy to change the way the market is working from one day to another. It's complicated. And some of the agents, given the previous experience, their view is, I'm going to do exactly what I was doing. And I think that's wrong too, okay? And I'm advising my clients, you have to be careful with these regulations. You need to adapt. So it's going to be challenging.
Yes, like you said, there's some very good features of these regulations, the license, the agents tribunal, compliance, people not tamper with your clients for at least until the last 2 months of the contract. So there's a lot of very good features. When you mention Emilio, just for our listeners, you're referring to Emilio Garcia Silveiro, the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer of FIFA, I assume.
Yeah.
Is that right?
In fact, he has done a great job in his position during the last years. I've been working in this market for 20 years, and I can tell you that 15 years ago to file any type of claim in FIFA was a nightmare. It took years to take a decision, and now we have a great DCR, a great players status committee, and these regulations, 80% of the regulations are fine. But I think they made a huge mistake with the cap and with some of the matters I told you. And I hope they change their mind. And I hope there is a real negotiation process on this.
One last question. Really appreciate your time and your insight, especially in terms of the Spanish market, but overall your feeling about also the regulations. I'm an international agent. I want to do business in Spain. As a lawyer, Rodrigo, what advice would you give international agents to navigate the current situation in Spain, but also considering the complexities of the market? You've got the Spanish buyout clause that goes into a lot of players' contracts. You've got the La Liga minimum wage standards. What advice or guidance would you give to an international agent if they want to come into Spain and do deals with their players?
Well, first of all, the Spanish market has some particularities, as you mentioned, one of them, which is the rescission clause, the buyout clause. But also you have to bear in mind that when you make deals in Spain, all the labor contracts in Spain are compulsory going to a Spanish labor court. I mean, it's very rare and difficult to take a Spanish labor dispute to FIFA or PAS on any arbitration, because our arbitration law prohibits to take labor cases to arbitration, for example. And this is something that many agents, international agents, doesn't know. And the problem is that when you approach to Spain, you cannot come with the approach of FIFA regulations governing the status and transfer of players. You have to come with the works statutes in Spain and with the Spanish regulations in your mind, which is obviously not self-evident. So that's the first advice. In the past, there were a lot of troubles with transfer fee, for example, with the Spanish clubs, because we have a bankruptcy law, and some of the clubs use the bankruptcy law to avoid payment of transfer. And that was UK clubs, which I work a lot with, their minds were blowing when they knew about this. So you need to take local legal advice when you do deals in Spain. The interim measures, again, as I told, they're gonna give you an advantage if you want to make deals in Spain, but you have to expect some reluctancy from the Spanish clubs to apply this. But we also have a complex tax rules in Spain. You have to bear this in mind. Spain is a country where, if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but all the image right cases we had in Spain, and with criminal cases against Ronaldo, against Messi, against all the top players. I mean, these are the type of things that you have to bear in mind in Spain. And laws are changing. And for example, in Italy, I don't know if you heard about the cancellation of the tax advantage on the Crestita law, which was an advantageous tax system for new players. These are the type of things that can change in Spain. So you have to bear in mind that you cannot come with, let's say, with a FIFA approach or an international approach coming to Spain. You're going to have an advantage for the next market, which is that you're going to be able to negotiate different commissions. But I don't think it's going to be so huge the advantage. And I think it's going to depend on what happens in England too. So let's see what happens.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. That's fantastic. Thank you for that summary, insight on the case at Madrid, and also what's going to happen in Spain going forward, at least in the interim period, the next transfer windows. Thank you so much for coming on to our podcast.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. Bye.
It is great to be able to get that insight from Rodrigo, who spearheaded the Spanish challenge to the FIFA football agents regulations against not just the Spanish FA, but also FIFA. Agents, however, need to still be aware, even though the caps no longer apply, of the intricacies of the Spanish landscape. Spain is a very important market for agents. It has unique features, like I mentioned earlier, the famous Spanish buyout clause for players, which goes in most player contracts, but also has collective bargaining agreements that apply with La Liga. It has, as Rodrigo mentioned, labor law. Basically, if you want to operate as an international agent, you need to be aware of all these other things. So Spain is not carte blanche just because of the decision to not implement the cap. So we must be aware of that. So now we know what we are in Spain at this time, but what about elsewhere? And I want to focus on our National Football Agents Regulations Roundup. We've got 3 countries today, Jonathan. Firstly, Hungary. Hungary football agent regulations have got a few interesting intricacies, I would say, compared to the FIFA ones. The first one is the Hungarian FA communicates with clubs, football agents via email, which is the valid means of communication and can be used to waiver set deadlines. So they're looking at the methodology of using email as probably the tool to deal with agent-related matters. Now, if any issues not in the Hungarian regulations, then those issues are determined by the Hungarian FA General Secretary. The one I actually found interesting is other services. We talk about football agent services, which are covered by the caps, well, not so much in Spain, but other services which are outside the cap. Now, any other service provided by a football agent in Hungary include a service called player monitoring. I don't know if that means scouting, but that's a little bit different to what we're sort of used to. And the final thing in Hungary is the Hungarian regulations allow a football agent and a client of a football agent to apply to a regular court for legal redress. However, they also have their own sports permanent select committee to decide legal disputes from a rep agreement. Obviously, that is domestic involvement, has to be the feature there, not an international dimension. I want to turn our attention to Finland, and this is quite interesting. Two things with Finland. One is they call it football agent services or soccer agent services. And the interesting thing is they define what they are, but also they mention one of the football agent services is the purpose or goal of which is to reach a commercial agreement. So they actually mention commercial agreements in the football agent services. Now, the way I've understood a lot of the football agent regulations, commercial agreements like image rights or commercial contracts, sponsorship contracts are always covered outside in the other services. It seems that in Finland, it's also part of the football agent services to a degree. Now, the very interesting thing, this is the first time I've seen this in a national football agent regulation. In the Finnish regulations, they actually have an exception rule. They have an exception for player transfers related to Germany. They actually refer to the Dortmund decision and the injunction in their regulations and say that the following things, the ban in relation to the fee ceilings, or any attachment to Germany, or any parties involved in the Dortmund legal case, the regulations don't apply. And they also have a link to the case. And any transaction that relates to Germany is not covered by the regulations or the cap. So I've never seen any other national regulations talk about the German situation, and the Finnish regulations do that. So that's quite remarkable for me. And finally, we're moving to the subcontinent. India, where the All Indian Football Federation has also published their regulations, and they've got some unique little features. One is their regulation apply to transactions in terms of domestic transactions, but not just domestic transactions, but all transactions that involve players who hold Indian domicile status. So that's quite interesting. That's someone who's domiciled or resident in India. They may be an international player, I'm not sure, but basically if they hold domicile in India, then their regulations apply. The Indian regulations also talk about a demarcation of the roles between the Indian FA's different committees. They've got a player status committee, a disciplinary committee, and an ethics committee. And they outline each committee's role, and that the player status committee is the one that addresses representation agreements and those kind of disputes that involve agents. The final thing with India is there is a specific mention that third parties cannot be involved in the payment of the service fees. And it actually mentions clubs. Now, I know from a lot of Australian players going to India and advising in a few deals that clubs tended to pay the agent fees on behalf of the players. I think in this case, knowing that it's been the practice in the Indian Super League, in the Indian I-League, here the regulation actually stipulate that clubs can be sectioned as a third party if they pay. Obviously, if it's less than 200,000, then the player wants the club to pay. That's different, 200,000 USD, but the Indian FA has responded to that scenario. For now, this is probably the final summary of the National Football Agent regulations for a while. I think we need to focus on some other topics. Saying this, there's more than at least 150 countries who haven't published their National Football Agent regulations. I know some have passed them, like from an African source, Ghana, Tanzania, and Morocco have passed theirs, but no copy is available. And I'm sure that applies to some other countries. So that's the situation at the moment, Jonathan, with the NFAR.
I think it's safe to say, Peter, the work that you've put into researching the NFAR over the last couple of months has been really helpful to people. If people don't appreciate it, takes a lot of time because it's not only researching the documents and going through them, it's actually translating a lot of them. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. But as I said in the introduction, this is like a broken jigsaw puzzle, and many of the pieces are missing. And we're all going to have to deal with it in the agents industry, whether you're an agent or a club exec or a manager or a coach or a player. And we're going to have to deal with it for the foreseeable future. And that is unless FIFA have some form of long overdue epiphany. We have a combination of injunctions, unpublished NFAR, a link to Germany, that now there's a link from another country to the link to Germany. And the link to Germany effectively annexes one big football market from the FFAR. And on top of that, we're awaiting, as we spoke about with Rodrigo, a key arbitration proceeding in another major football market in England. Now, you've been all over these NFARs over the last couple of months. Is there a pattern? Are the national associations in some regions showing a trend of releasing whilst others aren't? Are some holding back developing NFAR and not publishing them and awaiting what the outcome is, whether it be in England, Germany, the ECJ, Spain? Are they waiting or are they just not releasing?
I think it's a mixture of both. It's a mixed bag. I think, as Rodrigo mentioned, we've got the Spanish situation, we've got the German link, now we've got the Rule K arbitration in England, which would have a decision very soon, 3 of the biggest markets. We've got Italy, who have actually, it's interesting, right now, it was announced today that the Italian FA has drafted new regulations, but they have to go to the Olympic Committee. So that's coming on board. Then we've got obviously the French, who've got their own regulations. So the 5 big markets, if they're outside the FFAR to some degree, that's going to make it very difficult. But I think it's a waiting game. It depends on the country. Some may have published them, as we've gone through. Some have developed them, passed them, but not published them. Others are waiting for the results. And I've noticed a couple of countries have just said, these are the FFAR. We don't have national football age regulations. I can see that on a couple of websites. Canada, for instance, just has the FIFA football agent regulation. So it could be various reasons, but I think there is a keen eye on what's going to happen in England and then subsequently in the European Court of Justice.
Now, I'm not going to ask you the question, well, not now at least, whether national football associations who have unilaterally decided not to implement national football agent regulations or release them are actually in breach of FIFA's football agent regulations. But I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who's perplexed by the seeming paradox, as under FFAR, FIFA football agent regulations, Article 3 on national football agent regulations, paragraph 1 states, member associations shall implement and enforce national football agent regulations by the 30th of September. It's a question worth asking. And on the topic of the arbitration proceeding in England, the Rule K as it's referred, it's a question I've been asked so much since probably August. When will we have the decision from there? Some people are stating it will be on the 30th of November. And it may be, but the fact is no one knows or should know if the process has been followed correctly. The date of the 30th of November was a projected timeline. It isn't guaranteed, as was the case with the original aim of reaching a decision by the 30th of September, which was pushed back. It could be pushed back further than the 30th of November. We hope it isn't. We want some clarity. And the reason for that could even be non-football related matters or matters relating to that Rule K. We simply don't know. And I think, Peter, you, I, everybody out there affected by this wants a ruling sooner rather than later. But from our own perspective, come hell or high water, it is our intention to bring you an interview in the episode on the 3rd of December, if not earlier, that may explain a little bit more why the Rule K has been subject to such delays.
But interestingly, the topic of Rule K, arbitration between the agents and the Football Association, was actually raised in one of the sessions at Soccerex, the big conference held in Miami this week. And as we know, in Florida, quite a few of the legal departments of FIFA are going to move there before the World Cup. Now, we're referring to an article here that talked about Soccerex, the big conference. It's called FIFA's New Agent Rules in the Balance as the UK court set to deliver a merit ruling. Probably not the UK call, it's more of a arbitration. The article's by Paul Nicholson in Inside World Football, 15th November 23. And basically, it mentions that the ruling, the Rule K, is expected in the next 10 days. And this, the article says, may determine the fate of the new FIFA football agent rules.
Yeah, I saw that. And a lot of it's focused around one particular panel at Soccerex. And I see Emilio Garcia Silvero, the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer from FIFA, who we referenced in the interview with Rodrigo, was on the panel. But there's no quotes from him in this article. And he, from my observations, has been abundantly clear on his views of agents and agent matters over the years. Maybe some quotes and comments will come out from Emilio from his participation, as he is an instrumental figure on these FFAR and the implementation going back many years. The article states that if the Rule K decision falls in favour of FIFA, the rules will be rolled out worldwide. Now, I find that hard to believe, with the ECJ still to be set a date for a hearing, and the injunctions in Spain and Germany, plus national legislation in Italy and France. I just find it very hard to believe that it will be rolled out worldwide. Now, if the ruling is against FIFA, then FIFA will have to return to the drawing board. Again, I think this is unlikely. Firstly, FIFA have proved to be so hard-headed now for some 2 to 3 years, if not more, on regulations of agents. 2, a lot of national associations and new agents will be hugely disrupted for a second time, and I think that's got to be avoided at all costs. And 3, how long will it take? Will it take another 5 years, and what is the interim plan? The article also says the ruling is expected in the next 10 days. Reaffirming what we said, that it is expected, but not necessarily guaranteed.
Yeah, we both mentioned the 10 days expected in 10 days. That could be speculation. That could be the insider view. We don't know. We know that the decision was meant to come at least by the 30th of November, which is not far away. But with lawyers and courts, things take time. What I will say is we need a decision probably before the winter window. Then everyone can assess where the agent regulation situation is. We know Spain, we know Germany, then we'll know England and what the impacts are. The European Court of Justice is probably the crucial decision down the track, but the English Rule K arbitration is very important because that could also sway what FIFA does next.
The article also references CAA, Stella and ICM as some of those bringing the case. Now, these are all arguably the same corporation now. They haven't mentioned Rete and WNG or Wasserman, with the latter of those being a huge agency actually based in the US where this event was going on. But another thing, one of the panelists states, outside of Europe, there is really not much outrage at the regulations. It is really a European issue for now. Now, this is reminiscent of comments I've heard attributed to people at FIFA, but in that instance, it was that it is just the English who are complaining. So what is it? The English? Is it Britain as a whole? Or is it Europe? Plus, even on this show, we've heard from people elsewhere in the world that they are not happy with these new FIFA football agent regulations. Australia, Japan, Malaysia, and also elsewhere in the world have not yet been broadcast. Now, Daniel Guy was also on the panel, and Daniel's the author of Done Deal, a book I think most agents should have in their library. And he is quoted as saying that if FIFA lose the decision, and this is Daniel's quote, with so many of the transfers of value taking place in the UK, it is hard to see FIFA being in a position or wanting to enforce the rules worldwide. Now, with all due respect to Daniel, again, I find that hard to believe. And if anyone who was at Soccerex can recall how Emilio responded to that statement, I would love to know. There are some instrumental hardline figures in football and at FIFA determined to steamroll this FIFA football agent regulations through. And I wouldn't put it past them in annexing England or the UK, as with Germany, if the Rule K finds in the agent's favour. And then FIFA rely on the ECJ to effectively flip Spain, Germany, and others.
Look, anything could happen. If you change something, it has an effect elsewhere. We know there's a transfer window in January and a lot of agents outside of England. If there's a decision, Spain and Germany have to do business under these new regs. They have to comply with the FIFA football agent regulations. They're going to lodge their rep agreements. We can't forget the other parts of the world in this whole football agent market. And that's the interesting thing, that it can't be always Eurocentric. We've got to look at all the other markets and what are other countries doing or other agents in other countries doing. So let's wait for the Rule K arbitration. I know it's going to be a game changer. It's going to change the dynamic and everyone's anticipating that result. Now, it's time to say farewell. We really appreciate all the listeners for joining us again today. There's a lot of interesting things happening in the agents world. And today with Spain, that was a fantastic guest as well who unpacked it for us. Please give us reviews on Spotify, on Apple. Share it with your friends, to any other people that might be interested in listening. And if you've got any questions or topics, please get in touch with us. That's it from me. Bye.
Yes, take care, folks. And if there's one lesson to be learnt from the wait over Rule K arbitration rulings, just don't hold your breath. You might turn blue. Take care.
The purpose of the Agent's Angle podcast is to provide news, information and facilitate discussion on regulatory matters, policies, business trends and issues affecting football agents worldwide. The opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only and should never be considered legal or professional advice. Furthermore, the views expressed by guests are their own and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you for listening.